Hello, it's absolutely ages since I recorded a podcast. So I'm feeling a bit ashamed as if, I really should have done one more recently. But those of you who follow me will know that I've had a bereavement recently. My mother passed. And I'm sure you'll understand that I didn't feel particularly like recording podcasts or really doing very much, I'm afraid to say. I'm sure many of you can identify with that feeling where you've lost somebody very important to you and sort of it's really hard to feel motivated. But today I feel I'd like to share something with you. So I'm sharing something from Secrets of the NLP Masters, which has been updated recently to Secrets of Neuro Linguistic Programming. And this chapter is all about beliefs. I work a lot with, well, as you know, I work with children and teens, and the beliefs that they may hold really can hold them back. Like I had a girl yesterday who was telling me that when she sits down to do her homework, she has a belief. She didn't put it quite like that, but she said that she just knows it's going to be hard. And she sits down knowing it's going to be hard. She spends ages looking at it, feeling like she isn't very clever, she isn't very smart, she doesn't know why she doesn't understand, she's confused by it. She wastes a lot of time based on a belief that it's going to be hard. Perhaps you've got a child like this, and it often happens with maths, but it can also be any subject. It could be to do with something else, like making friends is hard, or exams are hard, or changing schools is hard, and so on. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about beliefs. We're talking about something we hold to be true in the moment. And what that means is it's not actually true. It's not actually a fact. What it is what we hold to be true in that moment. It could well be that that moment changes, it passes. Maybe suddenly the penny drops and you realize, yes, I know how to do that now. And off you go and you do it. And it can happen in anything. Obviously, I work with children and teens, so I'm thinking school and friendships and so on. But it could happen to you in your sport. It will certainly happen to you in work. It can happen to you in all sorts of different ways. So, this is a chapter called Change Your Beliefs Through Feedback. And it starts off with a few quotes. First one is from Winston Churchill. To improve is to change. To be perfect is to change often. So this is about changing your beliefs in order to improve. John Seymour says, and he's written quite a few books on NLP, any single person's viewpoints will have blind spots caused by their habitual ways of perceiving the world, their perceptual filters. How can we shift our perceptions to get outside our own limited world view? It's a very good point, isn't it? Shifting our perceptions. Tony Robbins, who you will have definitely heard of, he says, in order to make your communication more effective, you measure it on the response that you get. You've got to take responsibility for your communication. And if you're not getting the results you want, you need to change what you're doing. So that's actually what I was talking about with this girl yesterday, that if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. She has a choice. You don't have to start with doing the subject that you find most difficult. Instead, choose a different subject, and that might give you a little bit of confidence, a little bit of sort of motivation, a bit of sort of sense of motion forward. You've done one subject, right now you can attack the maths. Then Buddha, we've definitely all heard of Buddha. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. Yeah, that's so true, isn't it? And then Richard Bandler, one of the founding fathers of NLP, says, If you say to yourself, it's difficult to get up in the morning, or it's hard to cease smoking, then you are already using hypnotic suggestions on yourself. And this again is what I talk about with kids, oh, exams are hard. I had a girl this morning who was nervous about her SATs. Now, she knows because the teachers have told her, parents have told her, the SATs are not important. They are about the school being judged. They're not about her being judged. But that's her left brain, her cognitive brain, her logical brain. She knows that that's what they've said. But then there's that right brain, creative brain that's going, but yes, but what if? What if they do affect secondary school in September? What if, somebody, it's still going to, still will affect her regardless of what she's been told. So the chapter starts. Sometimes we hold on to old, outdated beliefs about ourselves because they have become our identity and what we are known for in the family or at work. For example, that's Frank. He doesn't like change, does he? Or, typical, mate. We know you like a good argument. Perhaps we even reinforce them ourselves by saying, oh, me and deadlines. Or, detail isn't my thing. Instead of continuing to accept these limiting beliefs about ourselves, how about instead becoming aware of feedback and giving yourself the opportunity to change these beliefs? I remember, for example, that I used to say, oh, I'm not really about detail, I'm more sort of big chunk. But that is ridiculous because as a writer, I have to edit my work. Yes, of course, I do pass it on to a proper editor, somebody whose job it is. And I've got a marvelous one, Malcolm Parr, who used to be an editor of one of the big sort of, newspapers. So I'm very lucky to have him, and he'll pick up and he'll often say, oh, I'm just being pedantic. But yeah, that's what you want from an editor. But the first edit I do myself. And yes, because you sort of maybe miss things as you're writing so fast or typing so fast, it's important to notice these details, a missing S or whatever, or a missing apostrophe or something. So in the introduction to this book, I talk about the presuppositions that the original NLP masters found to be true for their models of excellence. So I've put them here again. So obviously for you, as you haven't read the introduction, I'll read them through to you now. Everyone makes the best choice available to them. Accept, understand, and forgive. 2, there is no failure, only feedback. Accept mistakes as a learning opportunity. 3, behind every behavior is a positive intention. Be curious, find it, and learn from it. 4, the map is not the territory. What you feel is only one way of looking at things. There are other ways that might prove more useful. The next one is, the meaning of the communication, its effect. Take responsibility for what and how you communicate. I mentioned that a moment ago, didn't I? We already have all the resources we need. Tap into all your resources and divert them to where they're needed. There's some absolutely fabulous NLP techniques for this. And I use this with children because they'll think that there's something that they can't do. But more often than not, they have that skill somewhere else in their life. Can be on the football pitch or netball court or whatever. The person with the most flexibility has the most influence. The more choices of how to respond we have, the better. Mind and body are one. What affects one affects the other. If one person can do a thing, anyone can. This is what modeling is for. There is a solution to every problem. Be curious to find it. What is true of someone else is also true for us. What we notice in others, we have too. That's how we recognize it. If you always do what you've always done, you will always get what you've always got. It's you who have to change if you want a different result. And that is so true in the work I do, in any sort of counseling, coaching, therapy. It's very much about change. It's about recognizing what are those patterns, what are those ways of thinking. For instance, if you're someone who tends to focus on what you don't want, don't get nervous, don't get anxious, don't worry about going into school, don't worry about exams, etc. If all of that focuses on what you don't want, that's what your brain is going to hear. Instead, focus on what you do want. And I'll share with you, in a parenting workshop I did quite some years ago, I had mums who were talking about their child being anxious, and they were worried about their child being anxious, and it was all about anxiety, anxious, etc. So I said to them, well, what do you want? And they just didn't know. They didn't know, like, what's the opposite of anxious? They hadn't thought about it. And there were, I think, 6 mums in that workshop, and there were 6 different answers. One wanted their child to be brave, another one wanted them to be friendly, another one wanted them to be something else, smart or whatever. So it's when we think about, well, what do we want? And then we start looking for that. You'll perhaps be surprised to find that your child actually is already displaying those traits. It's just that your worry about the anxiety is overtaking your brain, such that it's focusing on noticing that thing that you're worried about. And that's understandable. It's a natural thing. But instead, focus on what you'd like to see, and I promise you'll see it. Now focus just on that one belief and ask yourself whether this has ever been a belief you've held, or whether perhaps it was true for you once but no longer. Think about whether it is a belief you hold in one aspect of your life. When someone has given you the feedback that showed evidence of you holding that belief, perhaps you can imagine having a belief that is similar to this, or someone who has this belief. Can you imagine what it would be like to hold this belief? The more you think about the belief and imagine where you might have it, who has it, when did you have it, and so on, you'll find that you can actually find it for yourself. Focus on the belief and make it real for you by picturing yourself in a situation where you might hold this belief. I remember once working with a girl who felt that she was often scared of things. So I asked her to think of the things that she'd done that were the opposite of that. She decided that was brave. And goodness, she thought of so many things. She'd done one of those life-saving badges. She'd done some sort of cartwheel on a beam or something, in gymnastics. She'd climbed a climbing wall. There were all sorts of things. When we focus on the thing that we worry about, or the thing we can't do, it becomes huge. But actually, make it smaller. Imagine that it's really smaller, like the size of an ant, and big up the things that you can do that prove that the opposite is true. So if you're visual, create an image in your eyes, in your mind, a visual image. If you're auditory, imagine someone commenting on what that thing that you do. Or like, you're so brave, you're so confident, and so on. If you're kinesthetic, really feel into it. As you make this belief real, imagine acting it as if it's real now. It's like trying on a coat and walking around in it. How does it feel? How do people react to you? Notice what feedback you get and ask for feedback. Then there's a little section called integrating beliefs. If there's a belief you want someone else to have, perhaps a child or a colleague, you can give them feedback when you feel they are exhibiting this belief, in order to emphasize it for them and signpost it in case they haven't noticed. For example, if you want your child to take responsibility rather than relying on you, decide what belief you'd like them to have in this area. Suppose we describe the desired belief as, it is my responsibility for having all the right things for school in the morning. Wording the belief in your own mind is quite important, so you know what you're looking for evidence of. Then observe. Be ready to point out evidence of the belief and use the exact words. So when you see them gathering their things together, you say, I'm glad to see you are taking responsibility for having all the right things for school in the morning. If anything is forgotten, you can still use this belief. It's great to see that you're taking responsibility for having all the right things for school in the morning, And I'm wondering if you need you can integrate this belief at the identity level by saying, I'm proud that you are someone who takes responsibility for having all the right things for school in the morning. Or, of course, say, are you proud of yourself for taking responsibility for having all the right things for school in the morning? When children integrate a belief into their identity, it then becomes what they do, because that is who they are, rather than simply doing it because you've told them. Another thing is to ditch outdated beliefs. Sometimes people are reluctant to change a belief because they feel they've had it for so long that it's like an old friend or a comfortable pair of slippers. Yet they know that without this belief, they could get that new job, take that risk, ask that girl out or boy out. When having the belief might hold you back from a new opportunity, it may be time to look for ways to ditch it and replace it with something more useful. Decide what belief you want to have and be curious about where you have it currently. If you want to be organized in one part of your life, look for organization in another part, because that's where you'll find the skills you need. Maybe the belief you want is something you used to have, in which case, again, start looking at the time when you had the belief and piece together the strategy you used then. Feedback is evidence. Examples: experience of something. When we look hard for evidence of a belief, we can usually find it because we already have all the resources you need. If you're finding it hard to find evidence of the belief you require, ask friends and family, when have you seen me have the belief that, etc. Become your own feedback. When you play a sport, much of your feedback will be non-verbal. For example, the sound of the ball on the racket or the ground. You know how much I like tennis, I'm sure. The sound of your boot kicking the ball or the bat hitting the ball. You know what a good shot sounds like, looks like, and feels like. So much feedback is non-verbal, yet we tend to focus on verbal feedback, listening out for specific words and phrases that will be evidence of what we're trying to achieve. But when somebody says, good shot, and you know it wasn't because you've listened to the sound it made and you can see it was not as good as you hoped, then we are quick to dismiss the feedback because it doesn't concur with our own view. Start to become your own feedback by setting desirable outcomes for each shot and giving yourself feedback on each one, the good and the less good. Remember to start with a positive comment. I hit the ball in the right place. Then what could be better? I need to hit harder next time. And finish with a good point. I'm making progress. The last part of the feedback is the belief part. So make sure when you complete your feedback loop, you focus on the belief that you're working on regarding your performance. So the end of the chapter is all about putting it all together. Ignore people who say that it's difficult to change your beliefs, because it isn't. We change beliefs all the time as we experience new things, learn more about the world, and develop ourselves personally. You can find evidence or feedback on nearly every belief you could have somewhere in your life. So be open to it and question yourself to increase your flexibility. The more choices you have about the beliefs you want to espouse, the more control you will have over your life. So I hope you enjoyed that and found it helpful. As I said, that's from The Secrets of Neuro-Linguistic Programming. There are 50 chapters, 50 techniques to be exceptional. They have practical applications, as that one did. And also they cover things like work, family, relationships, sport, and all sorts of areas of your life. So it's a great book. I mean, just because I work with children and teens, this is a book that's, doesn't have to be for parents at all. It's one of the few books actually that I'd say is sort of really for anyone. Although I would say that, wouldn't I? I hope you're buying my books, and you can find them in the bookshop or the My Books section of my website, which is Judy, Judy, at judybartkowiak.com. Or, of course, you can find them on Amazon and any good bookshop. So bye for now.